What if I told you that the most important woman in the entire Bible, a woman whose decision changed the fate of every single human being alive today, doesn't have a name? Not a forgotten name, not a lost name, a name that was never written down. Imagine it, a world ending, not metaphorically, literally. The sky breaking open, the earth cracking beneath water that has no ceiling, animals filling a boat. A man who spent decades telling a world that would not listen that judgment was coming, and beside him, a woman. She watched her neighbors drown. She watched her world disappear beneath a waterline that didn't stop rising for 40 days. She survived, and we don't know her name. That should stop you cold. Because here's what almost no one talks about. Across the ancient world, across thousands of years of tradition, Jewish scholars, Islamic theologians, early Christian writers, Ethiopian sacred texts, people couldn't stop trying to figure out who she was. They gave her names. They wrote her stories. They argued about her bloodline. The silence wasn't acceptable to them either. So who was she? And why does the answer matter far more than most people realize? Before we can understand who she was, we have to understand what she walked into. The world described in Genesis before the flood is not the world we imagine. This wasn't a primitive, simple age. According to the text itself, this was a civilization with cities, with music, with metalworking, with agriculture, a world sophisticated enough to have already deeply corrupted itself. Genesis 6 doesn't mince words. It says the earth was filled with violence, that human evil had reached a kind of totality, not just bad behavior, but a moral collapse so complete that God described it as grief. God was grieved in his heart. Think about that language. Not anger first, grief first. Now put yourself inside it. You are a woman living in this world. You have a husband who has been publicly building a massive wooden structure for somewhere between 50 and 100 years. Some traditions say longer. Your neighbors have watched this happen. They've laughed. They've mocked. They've called him delusional. You have sons, 3 of them, and their wives. Women who, like you, had no divine vision of their own. No burning bush, no voice from the heavens. Just a family bound by a man's conviction. What does it feel like to build your life around a calling that was never given to you? This is the emotional world she inhabited, not the Hollywood version with the glowing light and the swelling music. The real version, full of social shame, uncertainty, and the long patience of waiting for something that hadn't happened yet. And yet, in the text that has shaped more human civilization than almost any other document, she appears briefly, moves through the story, and is never named. The daughters of men are named in genealogies. Secondary characters get names. But the woman who boarded the ark, survived the flood, and repopulated the earth from her own family line, nothing. Why? Here's what the text actually tells us about her circumstances, and it's more than most people notice. She is mentioned 4 times in the flood narrative, 4 times. Always in a list, Noah, his wife, his sons, their wives. She is never separated from that list, never given a moment alone with the narrative. She travels with Noah but never speaks to him in scripture. She boards the ark, she leaves the ark, she survives. And that's it. But read between the lines, most people miss this. This woman outlived every friend she had ever made, every neighbor, every woman she grew up with, every person she'd ever spoken to outside her immediate family, dead. Swallowed by a catastrophe that left her as one of only 8 human beings on the entire planet. We talk about Noah's faith. We talk about his obedience. We celebrate his ark. But what about the grief of survival? What does it do to a person, to a woman, to watch everything she's ever known become a graveyard? How do you hold on to yourself when the whole world is gone? The theological tradition has always emphasized the covenant, God's promise, the rainbow, the new beginning. But before the rainbow, there were 40 days of rain, and then 150 days of the water holding steady. That's nearly half a year of floating on top of a planet that had become an ocean, with the smell, with the noise, with the weight of knowing now. Here's the layer that hits differently. In the ancient Near East, being unnamed in a sacred text was not always accidental. Women in biblical narrative are sometimes unnamed for deliberate literary or cultural reasons, to represent a category, to function as a type, to embody something universal. But some scholars argue something more unsettling, that her namelessness reflects the actual cultural reality of her era. That even in survival, even in being chosen to carry the human species forward, her individuality was not the point. She was necessary. She was not notable. That's not theology. That's history being honest about itself. And yet, the tradition couldn't leave it there. Across thousands of years, religious and cultural traditions from across the ancient world refused to let her remain nameless. They gave her names. And the names they chose, and the stories attached to those names, reveal something extraordinary about how different communities understood the flood, understood women, and understood survival. In the Book of Jubilees, an ancient Jewish text that didn't make it into the Hebrew Bible but was considered sacred by many early communities, she is given a name, Emzara, daughter of Rachel, a woman with a lineage, a family, a history. But in the broader rabbinic tradition, something more provocative surfaces. The Midrash, the ancient Jewish body of biblical commentary, identifies Noah's wife as Naamah, the daughter of Lamech and sister of Tubal-Cain. She appears briefly in Genesis 4, in the lineage of Cain, the line that had gone wrong. Think about that for a second. If the rabbinic tradition is correct, Noah's wife was from the line of Cain. The woman chosen to restart the human race carried the bloodline of the first murderer. This wasn't careless storytelling. This was theological precision. It was saying, redemption doesn't require a perfect pedigree. It requires a faithful choice. In the Quran, Noah's wife is actually named, though not by a personal name. She is referred to obliquely, and in Islamic exegetical tradition, she is treated as a figure of warning rather than honor. The Quran in Surah Tahrim uses Noah's wife and Lot's wife as paired examples. Women who were married to righteous men but betrayed them. They did not believe. They did not board in faith. They perished. This is a radical divergence from the biblical account, which simply has her survive. Two traditions, one woman. Completely different verdicts. This is not a contradiction to dismiss. This is theology wrestling with the hardest question a flood story raises. What does it mean to survive? Is survival itself proof of righteousness, or is it just proximity? In Ethiopian Orthodox tradition, preserved in the Kebra Nagast and related texts, Noah's wife carries names that vary across manuscripts. Hakel, Sial, Noba, each connected to specific genealogical claims about the origins of African peoples from the post-flood lineage. Here she is not a footnote, she is a matriarch, the mother of nations. Her body is the vessel through which an entire civilizational identity flows. And this changes everything about how we read the story. These weren't competing myths trying to fill a gap. These were communities saying, she belongs to us too. She is ours too. We've spent thousands of years trying to give her a name. And maybe that compulsion, that refusal to let her remain blank, is itself the point. Because here's what the namelessness forces us to do. It forces us to project, to imagine, to ask, to fill the silence with our own questions. Every woman who has ever felt invisible inside her own faithfulness sees herself in this unnamed figure. Every person who has ever been the supporting character in someone else's calling, who has sacrificed, who has stayed, who has believed alongside without receiving the vision themselves, sees themselves in her. She was not incidental, she was essential. The text doesn't seem to know the difference. That tension between her narrative invisibility and her biological indispensability is one of the most quietly subversive things in the entire Bible. How many women throughout history have been exactly this? Not the prophet, not the one who heard the voice, but the one who packed the supplies, raised the children, held the grief, stayed when staying made no rational sense, and kept the story going with her body and her constancy. We built monuments to the ark. We never built one to her. This is not a feminist correction to the text. This is the text speaking honestly, if we're willing to listen to what it's not saying as loudly as what it is. And here's the spiritual dimension that almost nobody preaches. If every human being alive today descends from the 8 people on that ark, and the biblical genealogy insists they do, then we all descend from her. Her mitochondrial line runs through every person on Earth, every civilization, every language, every sacred text written after the flood, including the ones that forgot her name. She is the silence inside every story that came after. Forget the theology for a moment. Forget the traditions. Forget the scholarly debates. Just imagine her, standing at the door of the ark, the rain starting. The sound of it, not gentle, not musical. The sound the earth makes when something irreversible has begun. Her husband had been right all those years, all that ridicule, all that loneliness of believing something nobody else would believe. He had been right. And now she had to watch the world prove it. What does it feel like to be right in a way you never wanted to be right? 40 days of rain, no land, no horizon, just water and sky and the sound of animals and the breathing of 7 other human beings who were the only other people left alive on Earth. She didn't know how long it would last. She didn't know if it would stop. She only knew she had stayed. This was not faith from a distance. This was faith with water under your feet when the water finally receded. When the dove came back with the olive branch, when Noah built the altar and the covenant was spoken, the rainbow was placed in the sky as a promise. Most sermons talk about what God promised Noah, but she saw that rainbow too. She stood on ground that was wet with the death of everyone she had ever known. The sky broke open with color. What does it mean to be given a promise after something that cannot be undone? That's not triumph. That's survival. That's the complicated, quiet grace of still being here when everything else is gone. Her name was never written down. Or maybe it was written down in a tradition, in a manuscript, in a community's memory, and then lost, argued over, replaced with a different name, contested across centuries. What we know is this: she was real. She was there. She mattered in ways the text only partially admits. And the question of her name, a question that has bothered scholars, rabbis, imams, theologians, and ordinary readers for thousands of years, might be the most honest thing the flood story ever gave us. Because the discomfort is the point. How many people have shaped history from the unnamed position? How many people have carried callings they didn't choose, survived catastrophes they didn't design, and repopulated something broken with nothing but their own faithfulness? History remembers the arcs. History forgets the women who made them possible. She stepped off that boat into a world that had been washed clean. 8 people, 1 family, the entire future in their hands. And somewhere in that wet, impossible new beginning, a woman whose name we still debate stood on ground that hadn't existed yesterday. She took a breath. She kept going. We're still here because she did. Maybe the question isn't why her name was forgotten. Maybe the question is why we ever stopped looking for it.